Welcome to the NCLA Podcast. I am your host, Rachel Mann, and today we are honored to be joined by Dr. William Sprankles. You will not find that on any of his social media profiles because he's very humble and very sincere about achieving that for himself. But I want to mention that to start out with. He is the Assistant Superintendent of Innovation, Teaching and Learning for Butler Technology Career and Development campuses just north of Cincinnati, Ohio. So if you're ever in the area, be sure to reach out to him and go visit the great things that they're doing. They also have some virtual tours that you can check out. Thank you so much for being here today, William. I'm so excited for this conversation and would really like to start off with just learning more about you and how you got involved in CTE and more about your leadership journey to where you are today.
Sure. Born and raised here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and spent most of the steps in my journey, various different educational spaces here and around Cincinnati. Started my teaching career, and one of my favorite spaces was being an English teacher and a varsity boys soccer coach at Withrow University High School inside Cincinnati Public Schools for 5 years. And while I didn't get hip to CTE during that 5 years, we had our school, it was a brand new startup school. We took over an abandoned CTE building. So we were inside this, I think my classroom was actually an abandoned cosmetology classroom. I was teaching English out of it. And the district renovated this space to have a new startup school. So my first 5 years was with Withrow University as an English teacher. From there, I went to Princeton City Schools as an assistant principal and a head principal, where I was really introduced to career tech through one of our partner school districts that local career tech provider, Princeton City Schools and 30 other districts would feed into. So my first introduction to career tech was through the lens of an assistant principal. And at the time, it was really kind of neutral. In maybe some cases, it was even negative because there was a particular type of student, particular type of profile where those students would seek out career tech schools. And there was some branding and some labeling and some false narratives that were happening in my administrative career as an assistant principal and a principal that introduced me to CTE the wrong way. From there, I became an educational consultant for CT3, which is the Center for Transformative Teacher Training, and was super blessed and privileged to travel the country and see schools from Oakland to Syracuse to Charlotte and everywhere in between. And in that consultation journey for those 3 years, there was many school districts that had career tech branches of their school district that I was able to just really explore and learn a ton about. And then through some former colleagues, I was reintroduced to Butler Tech Schools and embarked on an interview for an open position and landed here just north of Cincinnati, Ohio. And the last 5 years have been a roller coaster ride of transformative experiences grounded in understanding, evolving, innovating, and redeveloping career tech education.
Well, that is quite the journey. And I appreciate your candor in mentioning your original view of CTE, because I think that when you've experienced that, it makes it so much more important to change that narrative around what career and technical education looks like. When I was in high school, I remember wanting to sign up for a family and consumer sciences class, which was called home ec at that point, and I wasn't allowed to. My family's like, nope, you're not signing up for that class. You're not allowed to take automotive, anything CTE was not allowed except for marketing and business classes. So I got involved in DECA, but there's just so many great things happening in CTE, and to be able to recognize the branding problems, but also being able to do some great things to change that narrative is so important.
When I was in high school as a student, I was an athlete and I took some college prep classes, and there was this association that if you were an athlete, you shouldn't go to the local career tech center because you weren't going to be associated with your sports team. For any kid that thought they were going to go to college or was in these college prep classes, which is a traditional narrative we've all heard in the career tech world, right? Is because I'm seeking out college credit or college plus type courses, CCP courses, they don't offer those at your local career tech center. That's how I was introduced to it as a student. I think I maintained that narrative when I became an assistant principal and a principal. I didn't even know how many local college credit plus classes my local career tech center was offering my students. It was actually a place of being uneducated as a school leader. And then when I came to Butler Tech, I realized Butler Tech offers more CCP courses than any other school district in Southwest Ohio. And that was one of the first things that started to revolutionize my understanding of what career tech could provide to young people.
You mentioned innovation a couple of times already, so I would love to hear about innovative practices that are taking place at your school or your district even, and maybe some practices that can be replicated in other districts and schools as well.
Sure. I'd say at the core of recognizing where innovative practices exist is the direct relationship with the concept of productive struggle. Not all innovative practices come easy. Most of them, the thoughtful, more systemic, more growth-evoking innovative practices come with the greatest degree of resistance and in terms of implementation. And I think at both ends of the continuum, here's what you have to have is we're very fortunate to have a superintendent and CEO that not only models innovative practices, but encourages us to create that culture in the other spaces in the organization. And then at the other end of the spectrum from the superintendent, we have dozens and dozens and dozens of teachers that are implementing innovative practices in their classrooms on a regular basis, whether that be hands-on learning or project-based learning or new technologies in their spaces or curricular experiences. We got teachers that we encourage to be out front pushing the envelope for our community and for our student experience. And the goal is to create innovation that's led from the teacher space, not top down, but from the front lines, right? There's enough school districts, Butler Tech included, that might be doing innovative things that are top down sometimes, and that's okay. But there has to be a really systemic balance with recognizing that at the end of the day, it's teachers that are going to lead the best work, the most innovative work for kids in the district, and creating a culture that allows teachers to have risks and fail and go about trials and tribulations and be rewarded for making those types of innovative jumps in their classroom, right? So we got dozens of teachers every week, every month that launch new hands-on experiences for young people, whether it be partnering with their business advisories, which that's a soundbite in career tech education that doesn't sound innovative, but we got people that are doing really outside the box innovative things with their business advisories, from having precision machining Olympics where 10 to 15 to 20 companies are coming in our labs on site and they're offering or providing job interviews on the spot to the highest performing young people that they observe competing on pieces of technology. From local companies that are donating their robots to our mechatronics lab, to exercise science teachers in our satellite infrastructure that are bringing in parents and athletic trainers and homeschool administrators to participate in on-the-spot showcases with young people showcasing their talents, real time around student voice in classrooms. We got a lot of teachers that push the boundaries, and I'm super thankful that we have that teacher culture out front that keeps the rest of the organization on our toes, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And too often that's not even permitted. Teachers are afraid to even ask. So having a culture where that's encouraged and they're able to go out there and do more because it's not going to be penalized if it's a failure. That's huge. And I was taking some notes as you were talking. And first of all, I love the term that you mentioned with productive struggle. Having some level of frustration is crucial if we're going to move forward. But you also mentioned the precision machine Olympics. That's what a great partnership with business and industry, and having people donating robots. Just so much within that short blurb that you just now shared.
Yeah, super thankful for the teachers and the administrators that have been in the district that have kind of set up some of these practices. And then I think the role of an administrator sometimes is to recognize you have hotspots and have worked to figure out how to expand hotspots to other places in your district, so that more teachers and more students can benefit from one teacher's innovative practice by expanding it into other spaces for other kids.
Well, and William, yesterday we put out a tweet on NCLA social media asking for people to share their favorite leadership books for folks to start already thinking about their summer reading. What's a book that's made an impact on you and your life that you would recommend to other members who are listening in?
Yeah, so two books by the same author that are both in my wheelhouse right now, which have everything to do with CTE, but they're not going to say CTE on the cover. They're not going to say CTE, if you will, in the introductory pages, but they're grounded in the premise of best practices for young people, especially hands-on practices. And both of those books are by Chris Emdin. Dr. Chris Emdin is one of the thought leaders in the country that I follow him on social media. I try to dig into his articles, his tweets, and in particular his books. He's written 2 books in the last 5 years. One that came out 5 years ago is For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood, ... and the rest of y'all too. And then his most recent book came out about 12 months ago, which is called Ratchet-demic, which is really a celebratory text that encourages educators to celebrate young people for everything they bring into the classroom, their raw, uncut talents, and learn how to amplify their assets and learn how to amplify their strengths versus forcing them to be grounded in the particular ways of traditional education. And both of those texts are anchored in groundbreaking practices, which are connected to experiential learning, which is the heart of CTE, right? Like letting young people experiencing the process of creating, designing, stripping down, and rebuilding things with their hands. That's a universal expectation inside of career tech education, regardless of the pathway. From ag to FCS to engineering, from cosmetology to culinary. It's the art and science of letting young people create and design and build and giving them the tools to do so and not having any preconceived or prefixed notions of what their creations need to be. And I'm super thankful that we have dozens of teachers in our school district that let our kids create and they let our kids design and they let our kids build things with the tools and the resources that career tech is giving them. There's really a pinnacle experience I think that Butler Tech is providing for young people. And for me personally, to your question, I'm personally motivated by those 2 books because both of those 2 books help me frame my understanding and extract the threads of career tech education that are connected to other culturally relevant practices. In particular, students of color, in particular, students of poverty, in particular, students that are multilingual, and what their space and identity can be inside of career tech education.
All right. I have not read either of those, but I'm definitely adding those to my reading list. That sounds phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, here's my shameless plug because I'm an advocate. As we all are, we all have our little niche groups that we follow on Tuesday nights. There's probably 200 to 400 people at 8 o'clock on Tuesday nights that follow the hashtag hip hop ed. And every single Tuesday, there is a group of educators around the country that explore the intersection of best practices of hip hop culture and how it relates to pedagogy, how it relates to mindset, how it relates to politics. And a lot of the pedagogy that they explore on these calls is career tech pedagogy. So it's for sure a space that will give career tech educators life and enthusiasm and is grounded in joy and happiness is what those spaces are about.
All right. I'm going to have to take a break from this podcast, end it early because I'm on Twitter following Hip Hop Ed conversations right now.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I look forward to exploring that some more in detail. And I'm sure our members listening in are going to be checking that out as well.
Yeah.
And, thinking about leadership books and people who have had influence, who is a person that's had a significant influence on your life and what is that influence? What have they done to impact your career?
Sure. I think I have more than a few, right? So it's tough to always narrow that to one. One of those is an experience that I can name. And then there are a couple groups of people or individuals that have significantly impacted me, right? So one of the things we do at Butler Tech that's a biannual practice, we try to do it twice a year, is we encourage and we promote an instructional activity called showcases, where all of our students that are on our campuses twice a year publicly present a project, a concept, a story or a counter narrative of their choice, and they publicly deliver these. That's probably been one of the most influential experiences for me as an administrator, because the volume of counter narratives that you hear young people tell around the things that they're experiencing, that they're dealing with, what their influences, their hopes, their dreams, and their desires are, even in 2020, 2021, 2022, is just mind-blowing. So for me, one of the greatest influences is putting myself in spaces where young people are constantly given voice to talk about their narratives. That's still, for me as an intermediate educator, intermediate administrator in my career, that's one of the most influential spaces. I'd be remiss without not acknowledging my current superintendent, my current boss and CEO, John Graft, does some very powerful and simple things. He curates a culture where he talks about work hard, make friends, and have fun. And those three things being driving principles of the culture, and gives all of the people in our culture an endless blank slate to create. So I know I mentioned that earlier, but he's been significantly influential in my growth and development because of the creative space he allows us to lead from within. Prior to John Graft, always have to give shout outs and props. One of the most influential educators for me was Kristen Clyburero, the CEO and founder of CT3. She was my executive coach when I was a principal at Princeton High School, and I eventually went to go work for her consulting company. The mindset work and the anti-racist work and the culturally responsive pedagogy work that her organization facilitates was so transformative into my individual mindset on how I see education, how I see teachers, how I see young people, how I see the importance of what pedagogy actually means in the journey. It's not really about programming and career tech. It's really about pedagogy. And she put me in spaces that challenged me maybe more than any other educator had ever challenged me before, that challenged my own internal beliefs. So I'm thankful for her influence in my career trajectory as well.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that mindset piece, because that's something I've been pondering about quite a bit lately, is that we don't teach young people how to think. We spend a lot of time honing in and developing our mindsets as leaders. I just read this book, Soundtracks by John Acuff, and he talks some about this whole idea of how do we really examine our thinking and sometimes really acknowledge self-limiting beliefs or questioning why we think a certain way. And, we don't really teach that to young people. So I think it's important for us to really find ways as CTE leaders and educators to teach young people how to develop mindsets and how to think and how to also recognize thoughts that aren't beneficial to them, that could actually be hindering their growth.
I know I mentioned this a couple minutes ago. I think at the core of what your frame is, Rachel, is recognizing that every young person has this remarkable set of assets that they walk into the classroom with, and they might not be recognized in the formal framework of formal educational practices as assets. But kids are coming into us and they're more genius than ever. And if we can get young people to buy into that they're geniuses, they just got to figure out how to identify what they're a genius about and how to leverage it in their journey. I think it helps that mindset conversation, right? Sometimes we as educators have been in spaces where the mindset conversation is about forcing a new mindset on young people. And I think at the core of this conversation, young people are geniuses right now in 2022, more than they've ever been. They're more creative than they've ever been. They're more analytical than they've ever been. They're more artistic than they've ever been. They just need to recognize that we see that in them. And I think it immediately amplifies their opportunity to contribute back to the educational system, to classroom practices, to school culture, and our overall economy in a way different process by recognizing that they're geniuses versus thinking we're holding on to all the information and we have to give it to them. Young people are more genius than they've ever been right now.
Now, I can tell you're very passionate about your work and what you do, and I'm curious if there's one aspect of your role that you enjoy the most.
Probably what I enjoy the most is because of the structure of how Butler Tech is designed. We have 4 of our own campuses, and then we also have teachers that are in 11 other school districts, which spans across 55 total buildings in the county. So one of the things I enjoy about my job the most is at any given day, I can be on the west side of Butler County, and then an hour later, I'm 35 miles east on the east side of the county, and I have the honor and the privilege and the opportunity to see so many different school cultures and how career tech education and our teachers bring it to life in so many different spaces. To watch a 7th grade teacher in an urban high school bring career tech to life on one side of our county, and then an hour later be in a rural high school watching career tech come to life with a completely different group of kids is really kind of mind-blowing. It reinforces, not only does career tech work for all kids, it reinforces core values that we preach at Butler Tech that are led by our teachers on the front lines, which is relationships still in 2022 trump everything. And the teachers with the most profound, the most meaningful relationships always have the most beautiful and the most eclectic spaces. No matter where you go in Butler County, no matter what grade level, no matter what pathway, it boils down to, again, the people that invest the most time in meaningful relationships have the most beautiful, the most diverse, the most eclectic approaches to their classrooms. And that's what I'm most thankful for, is being able to see how broad that spectrum is. I'm super thankful for a lot of our administrators in this district. We often have so many visitors that are politicians and local elected officials from the state level, the local level, national level, business owners and representatives that reach out because they want to see what's going on in our classrooms. And I'm super thankful that we have teachers that curate their day-to-day grind with a natural tour culture. We have so many tours that happen. It's important to share those best practices. And so you would need a full day for sure to tour Butler Tech and see our 4 campuses for secondary, to see both of our adult ed campuses, which are right down the street. And then you get to pick from 13 other high schools and school districts in our satellites where you'd like to see next. So one day will just get you a piece of the pie. It's not going to get you the whole view.
Well, I'm looking forward to that piece of pie. That'll be awesome to actually see it in play. So we've talked a lot about the positive aspects and the great work that's happening, but there's always opportunities for us to get better.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that you could change about CTE or education in general, what would it be?
There's 2 or 3 things I'd like to answer in that question. One at a broad scale, and then one at an individual level. At a larger federal and state level, it's the funding model and how it works its way down into Ohio. We turned away 1,400 students this past year that applied to our campuses because our programs and our classrooms are at maximum capacity.
Wow.
Because of the way the funding model is structured. We need the funding model to change from both the national and the state level so that we can begin to expand physical capacity and instructional capacity to open and create more doors and more classrooms and more pathways for young people. Our goal is to not turn away any student, but instead is to create an infrastructure where we can offer more career tech across Butler County, because we have so many young people that want to be here, but we can't financially, physically, and instructionally accommodate them. So that's the first thing. When you ask, how might CTE get better, or how might we in education get better? I'd say the second thing is more of an individual leadership question, right? Like, anybody in a position of leadership has to be willing to accept tough feedback in their blind spots. And from an outsider's lens, it might look like Butler Tech is doing great work and big things. And I know that we are, but I also know that there's internal pockets of culture and morale that you have to constantly tend to that are tough. And so, that's important to acknowledge on a podcast. Is I know there's teachers that I can build better relationships with. I know there's other administrators I can provide more thoughtful leadership structures and opportunities to, and just being willing to hold myself accountable to providing a better leadership culture and a better instructional culture for the people that are on the front lines, and not being afraid to acknowledge that.
I'm still blown away about the number of students that you're turning away. That's mind-blowing to think that there are that many that are missing out on these opportunities, but also what a great opportunity to do something about it. And like you said, serving every student. And I appreciate that you're saying that about the growth piece, because sometimes in leadership positions, people feel like they need to know it all. And that's really when you sometimes need even more growth, because you're at this new position. And that's where a lot of people, that's why CEOs of companies have coaches. They have life coaches that are helping them along the way. It's a new scorecard, as John Acuff would say.
Tell me more about the John Acuff. Give me your 30, 60-second summary of that text or that book, because you've referenced it twice. What's the score?
Well, and I was actually listening to his podcast on my way into the podcasting studio, ironically. And it's just, he really talks about how we sometimes forget that when you get to that next level, that's not when you stop. That's when you create a new scorecard. You're no longer being judged based upon that person that you were yesterday or in your former role, but you're holding yourself accountable to higher standards. So you're looking at even more ways to grow. So it's, there's never this idea of having arrived. Yeah, definitely check that one out. And, I want to ask you a couple of questions based upon some things that I've seen you post on your social media accounts. And I love how much you're doing on social media to make the work that's happening in
Yeah.
Butler Tech visible.
Yeah.
But there was an interesting one about Nike shoes. Can you talk to us about these custom Nike shoes a little bit?
Our principal of the School of the Arts, Mr. Kim Hart Mung, he's a first year principal, and we're so thankful that he's joined our administrative team. He's a sneakerhead. Selfishly, so am I. He and I are both sneakerheads, so we like to have fun with our shoe game at work. And we were working with his visual arts teacher, shout outs to Miss Mary Catherine Ruby. We proposed that young people gain some experience in the commercial design phase of a project where they would learn how to custom paint and custom design shoes, because it's such a popular thing in teenage culture right now. But we gave it some purpose. And in that purpose, we know that we have 13 partner high schools where all of our young people come from. So we purchased 13 pairs of blank, all white Nike shoes as a canvas. And students worked in pairs, and they each painted a pair of shoes to represent our 13 feeder districts or our partnership districts. And they researched the history of those particular communities, their mascots, their school colors, important dates, important street names, and other icons and famous people. And then they painted and decorated these shoes, and then we presented them to to our partner school district superintendents on the night of our all boards meeting. So there's a ton of our superintendents posing with custom-made shoes to represent the partnership between Butler Tech and those particular districts that were created from scratch by young people here at Butler Tech as part of our visual arts program.
That is amazing. And I'm sure those kids absolutely loved that project, and that will stick with them forever, really learning the rich culture and being able to put that in a visual representation. And then also seeing someone wear the shoes that they designed. That's so awesome.
Absolutely.
There was another post that I saw either on Instagram or Facebook related to murals.
Yeah, so this is also connected to our School of the Arts, but this is the intersection in career tech of work-based learning, business advisory partners, high-level pedagogy, culture responsive practices. Is the lobby of our School of the Arts building is not decorated with art yet because it's still a work in progress. It's branded appropriately with Butler Tech branding, colors, and schemes, but there's so much available wall space that there's this beautiful mezzanine, and it happened to have 5 panels. We happen to have 5 pathways inside our School of the Arts. We have an instrumental music, a vocal music, a theater, a dance, and a visual arts pathway. So we wanted to create murals with 2 local muralists where they partnered with our students and our instructors to design these murals, and then the students executed the work of the mural to represent possibilities so that young people see themselves represented the minute they walk into the lobby of the school. So my favorite of the 5 murals is the vocal mural. All of the murals have these juxtapositions of what I would call radical opposites on the surface. So the vocal mural has Freddie Mercury, rest in peace, Queen, lead singer from Queen, on the board, and he shares the mural with Christopher Wallace, aka Biggie Smalls, rest in peace. And both of these 2 icons, one from rock, one from rap, one from the 90s, one from the 70s, let students know that anything is possible. They can fit in between Freddie Mercury, they can fit in between Biggie Smalls, and that they're welcome in this school. And each of these murals invite students to think at such a level that their race, their gender, their culture, their identity is represented in this school. So that was the purpose of it. You can see them on our website. They're on my social media feed. And it was a really cool project that involved about 60 students, the principal, the director of the campus, 2 muralists, and a couple teachers. So about 30 total adults chimed in with 60 total kids to do a community build.
Wow, just wow. Love it. And that actually leads me to my last question. You know, you're talking about these possibilities and seeing that potential and allowing young people to truly recognize that possibility as well. Talk to us about Decision Day.
When I was working for CTE3 and I was traveling the country, shout outs to Dr. Tamisha Barnes Jones. They call her TBJ. She used to be the principal of West Charlotte High School. If you're not familiar with West Charlotte High School, it's one of the most iconic high schools in the country because they were one of the first schools to participate in formalized desegregation after Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. They also have a very, very strong CTE program and micro campus on their main campus. Well, what she would do on that campus to celebrate 100% of her student body was they would do Decision Day, where every student publicly declared where they were going to go to college or in the workforce. And she would march these kids around campus and celebrate them to the underclassmen, the 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. And so when I left CT3 and I came here to Butler Tech Schools, what was very common in the greater Cincinnati area at the time was athletic signings and academic signings where you celebrated only your top 10 athletes or your top 20 academic students, your honor students. And I'm super thankful that Butler Tech is a culture that desires and puts practices in place to celebrate all kids all the time. And so we took some remnants of what I had been exposed to at West Charlotte High School, and our design team did a Butler Tech design model around it and re-innovated it to have our senior Decision Day. And so all 4 of our campuses, our School of the Arts, our bioscience, our natural science, and our D. Russell Lee campuses allow every single student on Decision Day to publicly declare and sign a certificate of intent to go either into the workforce, to either go to the college of their choice, or to enlist in one of the branches of armed services. And all young people are celebrated, cheered for, and acknowledged on Decision Day as making the first step in a formalized commitment to do something at the next level to fuel their passion or their purpose.
I have to say, everything that we have talked about, everything that you've shared in this podcast today is innovative and shows something that I didn't experience in my high school years or in any college as well. And it's such a great reminder of how much we have advanced in CTE. People say that education hasn't changed. They're not looking at CTE when they say that. So it's exciting to hear all that's happening. And I really appreciate you being on the call today and sharing these best practices that I'm sure many, many people listening in not only needed to hear this today, but they're also going to be replicating these different pieces in their own context. So thank you for joining us and sharing so many great ideas.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is super important is I tried to give shout outs to the people that we've taken their practices and we've replicated them and just made them our own. And anything that we do or offer here at Butler Tech, we are certainly willing to share with any public school, private school, CTE district, whatever we can do to replicate opportunities for young people around the country. That's important for us as a larger educational community to commit to. And then finally, just want to give shout outs to you. I'm not sure if that's a thing on your podcast, but there's certainly a high level, Rachel, number of people around the country that follow you and tune into your podcast, watch you at conferences, check out your books and the posts that you make. And I'm just super thankful to share 45 minutes, share 60 minutes of at least virtual space with you and just listen to your questions. And how you ask questions is a learning experience for me. And your tone and your demeanor are of the highest level. And just wanted to give props and shout outs to you for modeling and walking the walk.
Well, I'm glad we're not in the same room right now because my face is a little red now. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I love everything about what I do. And it's such an honor to be able to learn from leaders across the country. And since you mentioned conferences, I do have to point out that we met in, I'm probably going to say it wrong, so I'm just going to say Kentucky instead of mentioning the city.
Yeah.
but that's the first time we met. Is that correct?
Yeah, AKA Louisville, AKA Louisville. We're going to call it for the folks that really know the Ville. And we did meet down there at the Best Practices Conference. I think you were doing a breakout session on your book. You had just released the Martian text, if I recall, and
that is correct.
You were doing like a half day of best practices that I was in on.
Well, I'm so glad we met there and that we've stayed in touch. And for our listeners, make sure you join us in Cape Cod in September. And if you're listening to this after September, because this is going to be available for a while for you to tap into, check out any of our best practices conferences because it's such a great opportunity to network, but also make sure you connect with me. And we would love to feature you on a future episode of the NCLA podcast. And if you have topics topics that you would like for us to address on a future episode, please send me an email at info@ncla-cte.org. And because of your membership, we're able to offer great content like this. So thank you for being a member of NCLA. And thanks again, William.
Thank you for having me. Peace.